to newsagents.
I totally understand that people want to know what's going on, but as I say, the Gambling Commission have made it clear that I should not be discussing this. The party
but there could be more.
There
could be more.
So is that a question?
Yeah, there could be more. I'm asking you. There could be more.
Well, I don't know. I certainly don't know of any others.
That was the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, speaking to me this morning on LBC, defending the government after yet another twist in the tale that is Gamblegate. We woke up this morning to find the Sunday Times reporting that a fourth senior Conservative, in this case the party's head of data, has been brought into the investigation by the Gambling Commission, with at least 4 people, senior in the Conservative Party, reportedly placing a bet, at least one bet, potentially several, on when the election date was going to be, when of course they almost certainly knew when it was going to be. You might think in that situation, given how furious the Prime Minister has said he is about it, that the Conservative Party would do exactly the same thing that the police has done in suspending one of their officers who also appears to be involved, having been a member of Rishi Sunak's close protection team. But the Conservative Party have not done that. The people involved are still members of the Conservative Party. The question we're asking on today's episode is why? Why is Rishi Sunak saying much but doing so little? Welcome to the Newsagents.
It's John.
It's Emily.
It's Lewis.
And it is day whatever it is of Gamblegate, betting gate, betting shop gate, election betting gate, whatever gate you want to give it.
God, I hope they didn't put you in charge of slogans, mate. This is terrible. 3 words.
Fluttergate, that's what it should be called, Fluttergate.
Okay, I think Gamblegate because it's more kind of alliterative. But anyway, it's still going on. And a fourth person is alleged now to have been involved in this. The head of data, who had the best data possible, apparently, which was the date of the general election and availability of a number of betting shops, where he seems, according to the allegations in the Sunday Times, went and bet a whole series of small bets so that it wouldn't be noticed. And you could net yourself thousands of pounds in the process. And it goes on, and yet Rishi Sunak doesn't seem able or willing to close it down.
I do think it's interesting that last week on the Question Time debate, we heard Rishi Sunak talk about how angry he was, and he sounded very angry, and then nothing happened. And there is a pattern to this, which is that you sort of hear people who should be in a position to actually make change saying, this is a shocking thing, as if it had nothing then to do with their actions. And the alternative to that is people like James Cleverly, who I was listening to this morning, saying, oh, we've been told not to speak about this by the Gambling Commission. And if you think back to Partygate, what we were hearing then was, well, there's an investigation, so I couldn't possibly comment on that. And you ended up saying, sorry, you couldn't comment on whether you were actually at a party in your house. And they say no. So we've done this sort of third party. It's like offshoring any responsibility. The third party decides whether or not you can speak about something that you can speak about, because the people involved in the alleged scandal haven't denied that they've placed bets. So all we're talking about now is what actually happens, whether they have broken rules. And that is the kind of thing that you want to hear from the party, isn't it?
Completely. And actually, Michael Gove, extremely unhelpfully from the Conservative Party's point of view, and I think there are actually quite a lot of people at CCHQ who are very unhappy with him for saying this. He's done a kind of exit interview with the Sunday Times, and he has compared explicitly, Gove, not some opponent of the government, Gove has compared Gamblegate and Partygate explicitly, saying it is exactly the same sort of thing that annoys voters because it shows there's one rule for them and another for everybody else. But it is this crucial question, it seems to me, about how it can be that we've got a police officer who was part of Sunak's close protection team, who has not only been suspended but indeed arrested as part of this investigation, and yet it can be that there is no consistency because we've got 4 Conservative officials, 1 a parliamentary candidate and so on. They are still members of the Conservative Party. And I asked James Cleverly explicitly about this. You heard a little bit about it from it in the pre-intro. This was the full exchange we had about how it can be that apparently the police are taking this more seriously than Rishi Sunak, who claims that he's furious about it, but so far ain't done a lot about it. Why hasn't he suspended all of those people as Conservatives pending the outcome of the inquiry? After all, the police officer involved has been suspended. Why is the police officer suspended? His bosses have suspended him. Why won't the Prime Minister do the same to his subordinates?
Well, for the same reason that I suspect Keir Starmer didn't stand down when he was being investigated.
No, I'm not asking about Keir Starmer, Home Secretary.
Well, no.
I'm asking about, you're responsible for the police. The police officer involved has been suspended pending the outcome of the inquiry. Why not the Conservatives, as Conservative candidates or Conservative members?
Lewis, the police are operationally independent, you know that, and as I say, I'm very conscious that when other people involved in politics, Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, were being investigated for other things, they did not stand down, and they made it clear they wouldn't stand down or suspend themselves until the outcome of the investigation. I think it's appropriate to. I think it's entirely appropriate to be consistent on that.
Wouldn't it not send a message? The Prime Minister is the boss here, right? He says he's furious. He says he's furious, but he's doing nothing about it. The police clearly have a set of standards that they're applying. Why are the police more rigorous about this than the Conservative Party and the Prime Minister?
Well, as I say, the Gambling Commission are investigating this. That is the appropriate thing, and and the Prime Minister has made it clear he will wait for the outcome of those investigations in order to take action.
So why are the police taking this more seriously than the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party?
Well, I don't agree with that.
Well, they
agree
literally
with that
are.
assessment.
But they are, because they've suspended the person involved pending the outcome of the inquiry. You and the Conservative Party are taking a different approach. Why is there a discrepancy? You're responsible for the police. You uphold the highest standards. Why not apply those standards to your own candidates?
I mean, the point is, Lewis, as I've said, the Prime Minister has made it clear that we will respond to the outcome of the investigation. But the right thing to do is to wait for the outcome of the investigation. And again, as I said, we as a party have been given clear instructions by the Gambling Commission that we should not discuss this.
Sure, discuss, but they haven't told you not to suspend them. That would be up to you.
What leaves me utterly incredulous is that it's the basic law of political communication that you either get ahead of a story or you get run over by the story. And at the moment, there is a very clear choice for Rishi Sunak, which is just in news management terms, get ahead of this, suspend the two candidates at least. And then you say, look, I could not take this more seriously. I am absolutely in line with what the police have done. And it just makes sense. If you want to get on and be talking about Labour's tax plans or whatever it happens to be, in the remaining 10 or 11 days of campaigning, you would do that. And I'm sure that there are an awful lot of Conservative candidates who feel bewildered that this hasn't happened and that this is still festering. And again, it is that link to, as Michael Gove did, joining the dots to Partygate, which could not be more corrosive as far as this floundering Conservative campaign is going. It beggars belief.
What I would say is that I think Cleverly is one of the few voices left who is still trying to defend the government in the sense of a sort of cabinet responsibility role. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily going to play well either for him or the government in the way that he's talking about it, as I think Lewis has just exposed. But individually, if you go around the country, what you will hear now is anyone who's defending a marginal seat is kind of cutting Rishi Sunak loose and saying, I think it's disgusting. I mean, we heard that from Ian Duncan Smith over the weekend. I think this is Michael Gove actually trying to sort of keep his seat, Tory, even though he's vacated it himself. I think there is a sense that everyone is now just fighting their own patch in a very, very local way. And there are very few voices. I mean, I think I'd put Mel Stride maybe and Cleverly and Rishi Sunak himself as the centre, which is, to quote, not holding.
Yeah, and Sunak himself is unusually absent, I would say, for a Prime Minister and a leader at this stage of the campaign. You compare with Keir Starmer, who seems to be doing a profile piece sort of every other minute at the moment in various different newspapers.
And hating them.
Perhaps hating them. And apparently
not to answer anything.
And apparently referring to himself in the third person, like Keir Starmer doesn't like this, which I'm particularly intrigued by. But anyway, leaving that to one side. I think you've got to ask yourself, why is it? So Sunak hasn't got ahead of it. So why is it? So there's two explanations, right? One is that they're just really useless at news management and politics. Well, there's plenty of evidence for that. There's another explanation or suspicion or worry for Conservatives that is doing the rounds this morning, which is that there is more of this story to go and there are more names to come out and some of them will be more senior still. And James Cleverly, again this morning, did not rule out the possibility that cabinet ministers or a cabinet minister may be involved. He said he doesn't expect that to be the case, but when pushed, he couldn't definitively rule it out. So you've got to think to yourself, we've got the debate this week, what is it, on Wednesday, the last debate between Sunak and Starmer. If this is still running out, it's disastrous, right? Because it's a gift to Starmer. Starmer's already been out this morning again saying, if these were Labour candidates, their feet wouldn't touch the ground. And you're totally right, Emily, about individual candidates now ploughing their own furrow and frankly just taking their own line, which again, we spoke to Robert Buckland on the LBC show this morning, former Justice Secretary. I asked him exactly the same question about whether they should be suspended. This is what he said.
I do expect everybody to uphold the highest standards, and whatever the motivation of these people, whether they thought it was just a bit of a laugh or a flutter, really, is this really what we expect? I think not, and I'm deeply, deeply hurt and rather angry that this has happened in the middle of a campaign that is tough enough without things like this to complicate it further.
Do you think that the Prime Minister ought to suspend the people involved?
Yes, I do. I think that obviously the status of the various people is a bit different. You've got employees, and I'm sure there's a mechanism there which could allow their suspension. With candidates, of course, they're on the ballot paper. It may well be a matter for then the whip to look at it once, if, for example, they were elected, as to whether or not they should take the Conservative whip.
Meanwhile, you've got Keir Starmer running around saying, no, it's not a gift. It's anything but a gift. Don't talk about it being a gift. Because actually, you've seen every Labour voice out over the last few days trying to talk down Labour chances. And they're doing that for a very serious reason, which is that they're getting to a point where they think people will just stay home, that they've kind of tuned out this election. They assume it's a slam dunk and that everyone else is going to be voting, so they don't need to. And that's why voice after voice on the Labour side is now sort of talking in much more apocalyptic terms about the fact that they might not get what they want because, they're talking about not believing the polls, not believing the MRP, not believing that people have been convinced. And it is a very strange way, in a sense, of campaigning. They're talking about their own vote being lower now because I guess there are genuine fears that people are going to be quite complacent about something that they think is finished.
I think that there is a huge disenchantment. And I was talking to people last night who had been involved in the 97 campaign, actually on both sides, Tories and Labour, a dinner I was at. And there was genuinely a different level of enthusiasm for Blair than there is for Starmer. I think there is a feeling that no politician is much good. And I don't want to go, they're all the same. I mean, that's just a cliche. But there is no sense of, wow, there's this exciting thing coming along that is Keir Starmer, and that is going to there is that positive energy about it. There is just a massive negative energy about the Conservatives and about their offering and about 14 years of rule in which Gamblegate or Fluttergate plays so much into that you've got this feeling that we've got to change.
But what we know is, right, we know two things in this election. We know that there are still an unusually high number of undecideds for this point in the cycle, people who are clearly disenchanted with all of the political offerings that they're seeing. And we know that reform has eaten into what could have been any kind of Conservative revival. In order, with 10 days to go, 11 days to go, right, we know that there was a possibility that if this campaign had gone better, i.e. we had not had what I would say are the two defining moments, which were D-Day and now potentially Gamblegate as well, there was at least the possibility that the Conservative Party could try and eat in to some of those undecideds and at least close the gap. Not entirely probably, but at least close it. It seems to me that the way that this campaign has not only happened and unfolded, but also been handled, has almost been perfectly calibrated through those two things to prevent that outcome from happening. And that is the reason why ultimately there has been stasis in the polls. Talking about disenchantment, and again, the D-Day stuff in particular, earlier in the week, we went to Whitby. And we did that partly because you'll know that with our partners more in common, our polling partners more in common, Luke Trill, they identified very early in this campaign this idea of Whitby woman as being a crucial voter in this campaign and could be the sort of person that is, could be key in determining the outcome. We went up there, and that disenchantment that John has been talking about and we've been reporting on for the whole campaign was everywhere to see. Stay with us.
So sometimes the campaign trail just occasionally really works out for you
because I am standing just outside the Royal Hotel in Whitby, which happens to be one of my favourite places in England. Beautiful day, sunshine everywhere, looking out over the harbour side. And we are here not just because it's one of my favourite places, but for a particular reason, which was we are about to do, or sit in on, a focus group with our campaign partners, Pollsters Political Organisation, More in Common. You've probably heard Luke Trill, probably heard him on the show quite a few times, talking us through their polling they're doing for us. And they also do these things called focus groups, which again you've probably heard of, but parties do them all the time, and they will be doing them all the time right now, every week. And they basically get a group of voters together, either try and make them representative of an area or just like a representative of a particular group of voters, and they just test out ideas, test out slogans, test out policies, and they try and draw out what voters might think of them. And they're really useful journalistically as well, because obviously one of the sort of stock-in tools of someone like me, a political reporter, is doing vox pops. And they can be useful to give you an instant snapshot of something. But the value of a focus group is that people start a conversation with you, a longer conversation, because they can't go anywhere because they're being paid to be there. And they just give you little glimmers of not just what they're thinking, but why they're thinking it, what they've heard, how they've heard it, and a little bit more depth as to how they are in those little moments that most voters do, internalising politics. So we're going to talk to them about what they think about the campaign so far, politics overall, and of course, the key personalities who are shaping the campaign: Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, Nigel Farage, and the rest. And just to note, you might be wondering why it is that they are all women. And that is because at the start of this campaign, More in Common identified a particular group of voters, as campaign groups and political parties often do at the start of a campaign, who will be absolutely instrumental, key to this particular campaign. You might remember Mondeo Man or Worcester Woman from previous campaigns. Workington Man was the one in 2019. And in this election, Luke Trill and his team have decided that Whitby Woman, a woman who is in her 50s, in her 60s, have probably backed the Conservatives, certainly since 2010, but are now potentially up for grabs. Most likely Leave voters are going to be absolutely crucial in determining the outcome of the campaign. So that is why we've got this group of Whitby women together to answer our questions.
They're as bad as one another. They don't commit. They don't do what they say they do.
They've got no morals, no standards anymore.
And then they tell you something and it never comes about anyway. So you might as well just have Teletubbies running Parliament.
I don't think any of them are worth governing. I don't think any of them can govern, make their own tea, let alone run a country.
I think we know who's going to win. The thoughts of them having, any party, having complete control of Parliament is too much to bear. So how's any decisions going to be made? It's just going to be a one-party decision-making machine, if what the press say is true. No, I'm not bored with it. I'm just very worried.
How about you, Julie?
Similar to Linda, really. I'm very interested in it. And there is a lot of information, and I'm glad there's a lot of information. I think the problem is one party is so busy saying what the other party is or isn't doing, I'm getting confused as to what the actual party is actually saying they are doing. If they just concentrated on their line, what they were going to do and how they were going to achieve it, it would make my decision a little bit easier. I won't say simple.
You don't know which is true and which is fake and which is... If they're spending time criticising each other, but then, you know, the next day somebody will point out that what they said wasn't true 3 weeks ago. So it all seems just not transparent.
I mean, I believe in proportional representation, which never happens. But to me, that is the way to bring in everybody's vote, to include everybody on the level that they feel. But it's so confusing.
None of them change anything. Doesn't matter which ones you vote for. They all just don't follow through what they say.
Do you think it's always been like that, or do you think it's got worse in recent years?
It's got worse over the years, definitely, because years ago you knew who you were going to vote for, and that was it. And now, well, personally, I'm just not interested.
And Angie, were you agreeing with that?
It's definitely got worse, in my opinion. And I think a lot of the reasons it's got worse is we have a lot of EU rules we have to follow. And I think if we could get rid of some of that and govern our own country, it might give people the standards back that they're wanting.
Thinking about the current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, how do you think he's doing?
Well, I think to leave the D-Day celebrations early was just disgraceful. And actually, I would not vote for them on that alone. And saying that he was deprived of Sky TV
Yeah.
is a joke.
Yeah. I mean, he's got no idea, but then he'll use all the money for, like say, immigration, putting people in hotels. They're running out of money, so they take it off the poor people. He's just doing everything he can to irritate everybody at the moment.
I think of all the ones that are on offer, he's got the most potential. The thing that made me sort of doubt it was partly or mostly the D-Day celebrations and the fact that he left it, not just the disrespect, but the fact that he would have then been with all the other world leaders, and that seemed like a missed opportunity. Although I'm undecided now, I can't see any of the others would be any better, shall we say, for want of a better expression.
Poor old Rishi, in a way, because he did get the short straw, didn't he, let's be honest. When he took over the party, it was a short straw. I don't think he's the man for the job. I don't think he realises what the British people really think. I know he's born in Britain and he's British. He's British to the core. He is, but he's rich British. I mean, he's rich beyond your wildest dreams, isn't he? I don't think you can think about how somebody's going to have enough money to go and buy some bread and some eggs, or you can't pay your gas bill, or you're in arrears with your rent. If you've got money, all those things are irrelevant because they don't come into your sphere of life, do they? Somebody's got to be Prime Minister, and he's a lot better than Liz Truss. If Liz Truss had still been here, I wouldn't have been sat here because I'd have known I wouldn't have been voting for them.
Yeah, totally agree with everybody pretty much. He's got no idea how tough the world is out there for a lot of people. Do you know what I mean? He's got no idea how hard it is to have whatever a normal life is, because he's got the money there. He's never had to deal with that.
Let's go on to Keir Starmer. And what do you think of Keir Starmer, Joe?
I actually quite like him, to be honest. I think he's got more of an understanding. I don't think he's as stuck up, is that the word, or money orientated. I think he is a bit more of a people's person than Rishi is. I don't think Rishi's got any idea whatsoever, to be fair.
I do agree. I think he's slightly more down to earth, but yet again, it could be just another ploy to get him more favour than Rishi. You know what I mean? You don't know whether he's just playing on it.
I don't think he's got any personality, to be quite honest. But it doesn't mean to say that he won't be able to do it when he's in. No, it's not dependent on his personality.
I'm terrified of Keir Starmer. I'm terrified he gets a majority government and can just tax us to the hilt. I'm terrified that he'll tax our houses if we live in our house.
I don't know whether it's just his general demeanour or persona, but I just don't think he's got a strong character. And whenever I've listened to him recently, he's just saying the negatives of what the Conservatives haven't done, and I've been waiting to hear what he's going to do, and I'm hard pressed to think of anything.
Well, every time I see Keir Starmer, I just think of that Top Gun expression, egos cashing checks that body can't honour. And I always think that about Keir Starmer. He's just weak, and his hairstyle is absolutely vile. And I've tried to like something about him, but I just can't. There's something about him I don't like. And when you listen to him talk, it's all sound bites.
And also, if you look at the last Labour government, didn't they famously leave a piece of paper on the desk that said the money's all gone? So if you've got that spend attitude to make everybody happy short term, does that not deplete the coffers quickly as well?
Another politician who sometimes divides opinion is Nigel Farage. Kath, what do you think about him?
I don't think anything about him. I don't like him. I would not vote for him at all.
I've heard him speak, and at least he's quite direct and speaks his mind in a really eloquent way. But I'm not sure whether I could vote for him because I don't know enough about the negative side of him.
I don't really know enough about him either.
I think he's telling people what they want to hear. He wants to take back control of our borders. He wants to sort out our NHS. He's not afraid to speak. He hasn't got enough seats and he's not going to get them this time. I think if he did, I think he'd have a good case at being Prime Minister.
Even on Celebrity Get Me Out of Here, back there wasn't nothing thrown at him that he didn't go at. And I do think that what he says, he actually does try to follow through. Which he did on there with no qualms whatsoever, so I thought it was quite cool.
I wouldn't vote for him personally because I'm frightened of racism. I'm just too frightened of racism creeping in more than it is already. But I think people will vote for him, and when you do listen to him, a lot of the stuff he does say is what a lot of people believe. It's not all racism, but it's underlying in a lot of things he says. But it's not a million miles away from the same policies and beliefs of the Conservatives.
Luke then asked the group how they thought the current government had handled immigration.
It should be stopped, and there should be some collaboration between us and France to make that happen.
Why are they not staying in France? Why are they all coming to the UK? That's what I want to know. There must be something magical about the UK when they're sitting in a boat coming over from France over this boat, and it's not just France to here. My mum lived in Greece and they were coming over to Greece, but then they're going from Greece and to going somewhere else. But what is magical about this country?
Are they going to just stay hundreds of thousands of young men in Britain? Are they going to look for wives? Are they going to integrate? Is crime going to go up? Strain on the NHS, we haven't enough police. I know it sounds like a boring diatribe, but it's a fact. It's an absolute fact.
It's not about racism at all. It's coming through the proper channels.
It needs to be skill-based.
I got told to put GB News on. Has anybody watched GB News? Okay.
Seen it.
So I put it on. Well, I have to say, before I knew it, I've been sat there 2 hours. And I thought, wow, this is literally my cup of tea. Because their debate, their talk, the debate, there's no right, there's no wrong. It's opinions. And they throw the word walk around loads. And it's like, we need a new dictionary. But it's a very interesting show, and I think you should just all dip in and take a look at it.
So, Luke, we've just finished, and if anyone can hear, it's a very echoey room in here. It's a very grand old hotel, the Royal Hotel in Whitby. Was that broadly aligns with, I mean, you do these all the time. Is that broadly aligning with how the interactions you are getting normally?
I think it was a good microcosm of that group of voters. I think it very well reflected that group who are normally loyal Conservative voters and this time are just so cross. They can't quite bring themselves to say they're definitely going to vote Conservative. I think at the top line, it's just they're sick of it. They're sick of politics. They're sick of this sense that actually we've been... It's not drifting, but sort of drifting quite dramatically, they sort of said in the group, the sense that it was all relentless, and that came across quite strongly as well. And not a lot of excitement for what might come next as well.
I mean, that's the thing that strikes me most about politics at the moment, or talking to people, and you do it in a more in-depth way than I do. And that is the kind of caustic cynicism, right? And it's hard to put your finger on it in one sense, right? Because cynicism has long characterised our politics. But I don't know about you, there does feel like there is something, it's a sort of step above somehow.
There is no doubt there is something deeper this time. And it's not just in this group, it's in every focus group we do. It's with people who are loyal Labour voters, people sticking with the Tories, those going for reform, undecided swing voters. And the way I characterise it is that we normally have cynicism. There's normally a large degree of apathy. Not everyone loves politics in the same way as people in Westminster do. But I think the difference is this time is that there's this sense of futility on top of it, this sense that it's not just, we don't trust politicians. It's we don't think politicians are up to the job, that they can't match the scale of the problems that the country is facing. And what you've got from that group, but we also see in others, is just a sort of hopelessness that anything can get better, that Britain's problems seem so big that we're not going to get out of them in a hurry. And certainly this election, despite it being, there's this strong desire for change, people just don't think they're going to get it.
And in a way, I mean, that does speak to the Farage agenda, right? Either if not for this election, but then certainly in the future election. I mean, if he's serious about sticking around, I mean, that really speaks to the themes about which he is constantly talking.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt there is a bit of a let's chuck the chessboard up in the air mood across the country because nothing seems to be working. Plus, you get that sense of just constant broken promises. You heard it in that group, migration in particular. I think one of the biggest mistakes the Tories have made is talking up an issue and then failing to deliver. And there's this sense across, again, the focus groups we do that particularly sort of working people are being squeezed. So, one of the things we'll often hear, we didn't hear it tonight, but you hear it in other places, is this, or the people at the very top get looked after, the people who are getting benefits, being supported by the state gets looked after, but no one looks after working people. And I've never heard so much in a concentrated period of time, this sense of, as one guy put it to me last week, there's just nothing left at the end of the month for me. And I think Farage does tap into that. It's interesting. You sort of heard across the group, actually what is fairly typical about Farage, this sense of, well, at least he tells it like it is.
Or they don't know very much about it, which isn't bad for him, actually.
No, exactly. It's a combination of a bit of an unknown, but at least he, tries to do things differently. It's interesting that there is no doubt that going on I'm a Celebrity has helped him. That comes up in every single focus group where we talk about Farage. But yet still, what is interesting is there's this little bit of hesitancy that remains even on people who like what he's saying. And I thought it was interesting tonight that people brought up that, I just think it would be a vote for racism if we were to vote for reform. And that's what's holding people back. So it's interesting that those brand issues actually are capping, I think, reform support. They can get up to 15, 16, 17, 18%. It's harder to go much higher whilst they've still got that toxification.
Feels to me, Luke, I don't know what you think, but it feels to me that this whole election is it's weird in lots of ways, but there does seem to be it feels like there's a paradox at the heart of it, right? Which is, we're sat here tonight, before we started recording, we were talking about the latest slew of polls, which is out, again, showing, massive Labour leads, 20, 25 points. I mean, this group is representative of itself. It isn't a wider sample. They're all women who live in a particular place, who are in their 50s or above or whatever. But it is sort of congruent with this. Does feel like there's an incongruity, right, between the sheer levels, the scale of Labour lead and the feeling in the country at large. I don't think that is artificial or manufactured, do you?
No, not at all. I think my diagnosis of where we are with the polls is that it is broad but not deep support for Labour. So it is, for lots of people, just a roll of the dice. We might as well have the other lot. And that is driving these huge leads, rather than any sense of, that Labour has got something particularly different or positive.
Or they might be different.
Or they might even be different. You heard that again tonight. Aren't they much of a muchness? It's interesting, increasingly, you get Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak compared to one another. People assume they're from broadly similar backgrounds. There's some people who warm more to Keir when they hear about his background.
They were more positive about him than Sunak.
Yeah, they were definitely more positive about him, and they're more positive here about it. But it's not with any sense of excitement. There is no sense that come July the 5th, people are going to be chanting outside Downing Street, singing Things Can Only Get Better, because I don't think people believe that they can.
You couldn't have Things Can Only Get Better now as a campaign song, because in order to have that, you've got to believe that the political system will affect change. And actually, today, not enough people actually believe it ever will. So it would seem sort of fantastical.
Yeah, it would seem that people would laugh at it now in a way that in 1997, sometimes it's possible to over-exaggerate enthusiasm for Blair, but at least you could say, look, we've got a different vision for the country.
And in fact, you could have that song.
And you could have that song. And you couldn't have it now. People wouldn't believe it. But that's why I think this election might be masking something more unhealthy that is happening at the moment. I think we're probably, if the polls are right, and obviously I hope they are, given we do a lot of them. I have a professional interest in...
Although I should say your ones are generally a little bit more on the conservative side.
We still have a 16-point lead, which is 4 points higher than 97. It looks like we're heading for a big Labour lead, which I think could mask that underlying disillusionment, desire for something else. And of course, it doesn't take much. More in Common has a French office. And you look at what happened there, obviously Macron got in with that big majority for his centrist party at the last election, lost the majority this time. Le Pen ran him closer in the presidential as well. And you just worry, are we starting to see some of the parallels here in the UK? Is that what is being matched? You're going to get this big majority, you can get the destruction of the centre-right. And of course, when the centre-right collapses, it is far easier for the populist right to come in and move in its place, eating off that disenchantment. And I wonder whether Labour's had this Ming Vase strategy, this we won't say anything to scare the horses, we'll keep everything quite small c conservative in terms of our plans. I think that worked better when they were just facing the Conservatives, because people said, well, the Conservatives have blown it, anything were better. I think it's different now Farage is there, because now people have an alternate outlet. Very quickly, people might start to go, you're not delivering, okay, the Tories' brand's trashed, but actually there's an alternative now, and it'll be interesting to see where Reform's vote goes, in the first 100, 200 days of a Labour government.
Well, I found that absolutely fascinating, and it is so useful. I was reflecting to our team afterwards, because in many ways, and this is what I was saying before, this is the use of a focus group, it reminds us of exactly why people are thinking what they are. And in polling, or quant data as it's called, you only see what they're thinking. You're not seeing how they think it or why they think it. And there were just a few really fascinating, tantalising little glimmers of what is shaping, I think, politics more generally. So interesting how so many of them brought up D-Day, just themselves, without any prompting, how that had really landed. If there'd been one story of the campaign, in this group of conservative-inclined voters, they bring it up. Also interesting that they bring up, you can see that some of the Tory attack lines on tax are working. Again, people are bringing it up independently. So you can see why they're sort of going on with that. The most interesting thing for me, though, and the most disturbing thing for me, is the extent, that theme that I was just talking about with Luke at the end there, which is just how profoundly cynical people are, not about just individual politicians, but about politics itself. I think you can really start to see why that is. Because in the past, it may have been that individual voters didn't like individual politicians and didn't like what they stood for. But I don't think there was such a profound and utter rejection of their competence as a governing class, that bad things might have happened to Britain, but that wasn't in such a sustained way as we have experienced over the last 15 years. And I suppose if you really think about it, if you take it from the financial crisis right through to austerity, to Brexit, to the pandemic, to Partygate, to Liz Truss, and now Sunak's inability to apparently do anything, you have just seen, I think, as basically as far as voters are concerned, example after example after example of the political system itself being incapable of responding to the requirements of the moment, and indeed time and time again being seen not only to fail but to delegitimise itself. And in that scenario, in that situation, you can see and you can understand why it is that someone like Farage, someone who is not just coming in and saying, I will change things, but someone who is rejecting the system itself, why it is they are working on potentially such fertile ground. And that example that Luke gave there, or the parallel with French politics, I think is really instructive. Everything feels to me right now like Labour is being given a chance just because it's there. But if they cannot capitalise on that chance, if they cannot do the deep, proper, sustained thinking as to how to actually address political change in this country, I don't know what comes next, because it probably isn't a Conservative Party that is either destroyed or nearly destroyed, or whose reputation has been tarnished so profoundly that they're not in a position to come back. So I don't know what comes next if Labour fails, but I've got a feeling it's going to be a very different sort of politics to anything that we've seen before. So of course we have a special anniversary to celebrate, don't we?
Have we got candles?
Well, not quite. It doesn't feel like it's quite the celebratory mood, does it? It's 8 years to today since that hallowed day on the 23rd of June 2016 when Britain voted marginally but decisively to leave the EU. And it is amazing, of course, that in this campaign, the thing I think, I don't know what you two think, but thinking about this campaign and the tenor of this campaign and comparing it to the last, which was indisputably the Brexit election, it is astonishing. And we've talked about the reasons why it doesn't suit any party to bring it up, but it is astonishing the extent to which it has completely disappeared from the agenda.
I don't think it's disappeared at all, actually. I think it's just not being said out loud. But every time the Labour Party talk about growth, I think most people understand that they mean there needs to be better cooperation with trade, with exports, with imports, and even if you go into immigration. I mean, somewhere along the lines, we all understand that the more cooperation we have with our European partners in stopping the boats, talk about illegal immigration, the better it is. But I think in terms of mistimings for Rishi Sunak to try and be on the front foot with this and say, I'm a proud Brexiteer, I voted 8 years ago. You can just sort of feel the collective tremors in his party going, yeah, just not now. Just, can we just put that to one side for now? Well done, you. Clap, clap, clap. But just don't talk about it now. We've got 10 days to go. And we haven't got very much to show for it right now.
Well, I mean, it is still an awkward position to thread for at least some members of the Labour front bench who were vociferous in their opposition to Brexit, particularly on days like today. I asked Bridget Phillipson, who of course could be the Education Secretary in 10 days' time, asked her about whether she had seen, because she was a really fierce opponent of Brexit, saying it would ruin her constituency in Sunderland, whether she, all these years on, could see any benefits at all.
Made my views very clear then, and I was a Remain voter, but for me, those divisions have to be in the past. We've got to focus on how we get a better relationship with the EU, how we make sure that our country can succeed, that we deal with some of the problems that have arisen out of the Brexit deal. That's the focus that we will bring to it, not reopening those divisions of the past. And to be clear, there will be no return to the single market, a customs union under Labour, no return to freedom of movement.
How well do you think it's gone, though? We've had 8 years now, and we've been out since January 2020. Just in your view, I mean, how well do you think it's gone?
I listen to what businesses tell me about the barriers that have been put in their way through the deal that's been negotiated, and I want us, if we form that next government, to try and find a way to resolve some of that.
I mean, Labour's been very clear. There's no return, certainly in this Parliament, to the single market, customs union and so on. Fair enough, that's your policy. But in order to, therefore, to reduce some of those difficulties that you've described for businesses, and the fact there is now so much friction, that obviously takes two key levers off the table. Perhaps the only other one is more regulatory alignment. Would Labour be more comfortable with greater regulatory alignment with the EU?
I think there are areas where we can get to a better system. For example, Rachel Reeves has spoken about the chemical industry and some of the barriers that have been put in place there. I think there are ways that we can alleviate some of that. That doesn't mean reopening this whole question, but it's about finding pragmatic, straightforward ways in which we can make sure our businesses are better supported and that we can grow our economy and get more jobs.
Do you think anything's better, having had Brexit?
Well, I didn't vote for it, but that's what the country voted for. We've left the European Union. It's about how we make it work better, and a Labour government.
Is there anything better when you look around now? Do you think anything has got better as a result of Brexit?
It's hard to see.
I think Bridget Phillipson may be very averse to Brexit, but she also knows that in parts of Newcastle and parts of Sunderland, where there were very, very high Remain votes, people do not like hearing that they're wrong. And I think this is why Keir Starmer, you were talking about Whitby, we've just heard from Whitby, parts of the East Coast, parts of the Northeast, where that vote has remained really strong because people still think of it not just as Brexit, but as a kind of, a slamming of the traditional parties. And I think, that does explain why Keir Starmer will not, he will never say out loud that there will be closer union through the customs union or through an actual rejoining arrangement. Because the one thing, going back to your point about Daniel Hannan, is don't tell the voters that they're wrong, that people don't want to hear that.
The thing you hear most often when you talk to voters about it, this election, if you mention it, Leave voters, and it happened in Whitby as well, people will say, well, I don't regret the decision, I just think it's been done badly, which is exactly the Farage line, right? That's the line that he's trotting out when he's asked about it.
You mentioned Starmer there. I think the most important thing that Starmer has done in the past 72 hours of campaigning is the selfie of him and his wife at Taylor Swift. I bet you that will help connect with an awful lot of young people. Great photo, made him look very normal, made him sort of seem like he is where the rest of the population is, while the Conservatives are bogged down in kind of all the other things that are consuming them at the moment.
Can I be honest? I think those commas killed it. He didn't need to say Swift in commas. Swift campaign stop. It was like, oh my God, okay, Dad, just, get round your grammar. We get it.
Emily Maitlis lecturing people about comma use. I've now seen it all.
And grammar, I know. As somebody who was at Taylor Swift last night and is still recovering from the experience, can I just say the sort of sad thing is that we do know that Rishi Sunak is a real Swiftie. He does all his Peloton to it. He went to see her in the US and he's probably thinking, wait, why is nobody talking about me being there? I was there first. But it was kind of that perfectly pitched moment the weekend before that kind of, I think, got him to, as you're saying, into a lot of sort of young people's feeds at that point.
I had you down more of a Jonathan Swift kind of girl, really.
I can do both.
Yeah,
I can
that's
do
true. Yeah, it's not either or.
Proposal and the fearless. I love it all.
Lewis, did you go to Taylor Swift?
I was tucked up in bed, John. Some of us had some work to do today.
Yeah, me too. I didn't have work to do. I just didn't
You
have
just
a
tucked
ticket.
up in bed. Well, no, you just tucked up in bed.
I'm going
at
to
your
bed
age.
right now.
Okay.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye-bye.
It's that kind of night.
See you
for
tomorrow.
everyone. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.